Story 1, submitted to me by Cathal Donohoe. I'm from Ireland and grew up in a small rural village. For context, this village is mostly formed of cattle farmers. The village is mostly a straight road with some diverting old roads leading to even more secluded areas. The surrounding area is mostly fields or huge forested areas. These forests are full of old coniferous trees, so they are constantly full and hard to see through. My parents' house is down one of these old roads off the main village road. The house has a long driveway off the road and is surrounded by a huge field on all sides of the house. The last streetlight is at the very corner of this field, so it means that there is very little lighting and visibility around the house late at night. So this is a few years ago now, must be around 5 or so. I was around 16 at the time. I am a smoker and started when I was in school. On the weekends, I would normally wait until my parents went to sleep to have a cigarette. This could be any time between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. in the morning. I always go out the back of the house and walk around to the front of the house, mostly because I knew my parents wouldn't go round the front in the middle of the night as the kitchen was at the back of the house, the only place they would go if they woke up. And also because at the front of the house you are facing the old road and can see that streetlight far off in the distance. Along the old road are some more coniferous trees lining the road separated roughly 20 feet apart. So I reckon it was about 1:30 a.m. in the morning. I did my usual, made sure everyone is asleep, and then made my way out the back of the house and towards the front, so I could sit on a windowsill and enjoy my smoke. I remember it was wintertime as I wore a heavy hoodie and a beanie to keep off the cold for the few minutes I would be out. I remember the instant I stepped outside, I could see my own breath, so it was definitely cold. I say I was there for about 5 minutes or so smoking and browsing Facebook or something, when I heard some rustling. Now, from where I was, I say there was a good 80 meters between me and the old road where the sound was coming from. I scanned the road, but couldn't see anyone out there. It would be incredibly late to be walking that road, especially without a flashlight. I scanned for a few more minutes and eventually blew it off to the wind. I got back to my smoke and browsed on my phone when I heard it again. This time I realized it wasn't grass or the road, but it sounded like the trees and their branches. I scanned for the 2 or 3 trees that were on my side of the road and couldn't make out anything at all. Until I spotted it. There on the tree, directly across the field from me, was a dark object, clinging to the side of the tree near the top. I never would have spotted it except that it was so large that it made the very straight and uniform-looking tree appear as though it had a tumour or growth on its side. I stared at this object for a few seconds, trying to process what on earth it could be. Then I noticed it was ever so slightly moving. It started to crawl down the tree similar to the way a sloth would. I was in utter bewilderment of this, as there is absolutely nothing in Ireland that would be doing this, especially in my area. I let out a tiny, "What the fuck?" as I pondered it. The minute I said this, the object instantly dropped from the tree to the ground, about a 15-meter drop. It landed in our field and I squinted, trying to make it out. Then it stood up, and I noticed it was about 6 feet tall, had what looked like long arms and stunted legs. It then dropped onto all fours and sprinted across the field towards my direction. I can only describe its sprint as something similar to the way a gorilla will sprint at other animals. Needless to say, I dumped my smoke and ran around the house back to the back door and got inside, locking it behind me. I then turned off all the lights and hopped into bed. I lay there for about 3 hours where I couldn't sleep. I could constantly hear what sounded like a dog sprinting around the house for the whole time. This isn't the only time I've heard this sound. I know it wasn't our dog as she was locked up in the shed, and it couldn't have been a stray as the gates were closed. If anyone knows what this might have been, I would appreciate your feedback. Story 2, submitted to me by Jamie Atkinson. This is my story, and to this day I can still see the creature in my mind. I live in the UK. I was staying at my grandparents' one night in July 2009. Back in those days, they lived in a bungalow just off Anlaby Road. It was 1 a.m, and I was sleeping in the front room. I was reading a book. What's ironic was that it was a horror novel called Lord Loss. I was just about to switch the light off when all of a sudden my head swung around, and that's when I saw it. Walking past the window was a shadow of a figure. What was strange was that it had the head of a wolf and the body of a human. The hands were not normal, but there were claws, and they curled around at about 30 centimeters long. I was terrified. I didn't know what it was. It walked by without looking in. What is strange about this is the head was barely visible from the window. It was only many years later, after attending a UFO conference and on the way home listening to Dogman encounters, did the penny drop as to what the creature was. Since that point, I started researching the Dogman, and this year I set up my own YouTube channel, Expedition Dogman, in order to share what I had learned. This leads me on to my second story. In July just gone, me and my friend went out to Barnstorm Drain to track down the old stinker, the beast of Barnstorm Drain. So when we got there, we played some Dogman House to try and get the creature out. Unfortunately, we couldn't. But we did find a footprint and a den. As we were shooting footage of the den, we heard a growl. In the field opposite the drain was horses. They got spooked and tried to block off the nearby bridge. It was only a couple of weeks later I sent the footage to a friend in America. When he sent it back, you could clearly see it hiding in the trees. This is my tale, and to those of you listening, these creatures are very much real. And please be careful if you see a dogman. Story 3, submitted to me by Arrow Conena. So, I'm from the Hudson Valley in New York, and I lived there until I was 8 years old. I then moved to Virginia in the country. I still go up to visit my BFF every summer for a week or two. I liked living there, and my BFF lived right behind my house. Let's call her Anne. Our families are really close, to the point that around me and Anne's second birthday, my family put a fence around our backyard and added a gate that connected our yard to Anne's driveway. Her driveway was shaped like a big L, with the long part going steep uphill to her house, and then turning right into the cul-de-sac we lived on. The short part of the driveway ran between my backyard and my driveway, which was separated from hers by a solid white fence around 6 feet tall. The other side of the driveway, the left side if you were coming from her house, was our neighbour, David. Charlie lived with her mum next to David, then Ariana, who was Anne's cousin, and her family lived next to them. Then Carrie next to her, and then Tamara, who lived across from me. Now, if you're going by driveway, everyone besides me and Tamara lived in the circle, while me and Tamara lived at the very bottom of the hill. Now that the background is done, it was 2 days after Anne's birthday, and me, her, Marie, her cousin, who's a bit younger and she's really close to, who lives 30 minutes away, Marina and Mary, our friends, came over for a few hours. We still had some light out, so we all went to play softball in the cul-de-sac. It was getting dark when Anne's cousin came out of her house to give her a bag of clothes as hand-me-downs for her birthday. Me and Anne went to her room to watch a movie, and around 11 she realized she had left her bag of clothes under a bush in Ariana's yard. I didn't want to go out with her due to the fact that I'm pagan and know about the legend of Wendigos and skinwalkers. She begged me while I tried to tell her to wait until tomorrow, but she insisted it's not an incredible area. So we went out and walked down her driveway. On the left side, at the top part of her driveway, are some woods that wrap around the cul-de-sac just behind her cousin's house. I kept looking there and got a bad feeling. We got to halfway across the circle when we thought we saw something on the top of the hill. It looked like a person, but pretty tall. We figured it was one of Ariana's friends since she'd had a party earlier, and since they were college kids, someone might be hanging around. We got the bag, and when we looked back, they were not there. We got right in front of her driveway and noticed some eyes looking at us from the bushes on the left side of my old house. The eyes belonged to a black shape in the shadows. I couldn't quite make out what they were, but I knew they belonged to something that wasn't human. I started running, and Anne called after me and ran to catch me. She passed me since she's an athlete, and I trained my eyes on her and refused to look back. We got in the bottom door that led to her grandparents' apartment. We ran through there and into their den. We laid on the floor for a couple of minutes before she asked me what happened. I told her I couldn't fully explain it. She's still the bravest person I know, and she still won't go out at night unless there's constant light. Thinking back on it, there was a coyote sighted by Charlie's mum when we were 6 in the woods behind her house. And we thought she just saw a dog since there were no coyotes in the area. Looking at it now, I wonder if it wasn't a coyote, but something more sinister. Before I continue to the next stories, I just want to say thank you for choosing to watch this video, and I hope you're enjoying my narration. If you are, please go ahead and hit the like button, and if you don't already, subscribe to my channel, it really helps me out. The remaining stories in this video are from Reddit. Story 4 by Reddit user winter_count_728. I was 18 when this story took place, in the winter of 2015. It's not super long and not particularly scary, though I sure was terrified when it happened. It was on a logging road south of Swan Lake, Montana, sort of near Beaver Creek, I believe. There was a decent amount of snow on the ground. I was visiting home, Swan Lake, Montana, for a couple of days, and my little sister, 17-year-old female, and I wanted to go for a drive and listen to music. So we drove for a good 20 minutes away and find this back road and pull off a good distance from the main road so no one would see us. It was pitch black out, and in winter, it's so dead silent at night it's eerie, especially out in the boonies like that. I left my headlights on because I had this creepy feeling like we were being watched, but just figured it was a deer or something. I'd seen moose on that road before, so I knew it was busy. My sister and I were having a conversation when I looked out the trees, and I swear I see this emaciated pale white humanoid type thing, just barely trying to hide behind a tree. It was still in the darkness beyond my headlights, so it kind of melted into the shadows. I stared at it for a long time. My sister was involved with something she was talking about, so she was oblivious to my change in mood. I couldn't take my eyes off it. It had this misshaped head that was too big for its thin body, and its eyes were 2 huge black unblinking marbles. It didn't move or do anything, so I kind of told myself it was just something I was seeing in the shadows. It was just beyond the light enough that I could write it off that easily, I guess. I went back to talking with my sister for a while and decided to see if I could still see the shape of the creature in the shadows. And the next time I looked up, it was closer, now at the edge of the light. I felt so scared my eyes filled with tears. It was sort of hunched to its right side and was standing with a rounded back with its bony weird hands in a claw shape. I had pulled into the beginning of a single lane road that was prowled 10 feet in. There was no room for me to turn around, so I had to back out. I made the terrible mistake of just gunning it backwards. Every time I kept looking back, it was closer and closer. I ripped the plastic covering off of the driver's side mirror, almost hitting a tree in my rush. I hate to say that I left it there. I was too scared to stop and pick it up. Sorry, Mother Nature. My sister never saw the thing, and she was super confused about why I randomly decided to get quiet and then book it out. We drove for a while longer, but I didn't pull off anywhere. I still felt really creeped out. It took me a while to get comfortable going out in the woods alone or driving down back roads alone at night again. I definitely still have no clue what it was. It wasn't some confused hiker wandering around naked, but it had the upright body of a person. It looked like one of those Dover Deamon sketches, but I was between Swan Lake and Seeley Lake, Montana, and it was white and ashen. Story 5 by Reddit user Jim_Sav. Sorry if this is a bit of a long post, but I wanted to share this experience with you wonderful people. There's this forest near my house here in southeast England that me and my friends use for mountain biking, but it's got a very uncomfortable, strange vibe to it. The only person we ever see here is the same older man walking his dog, but he always appears when we're feeling really uneasy due to the energy. He will just suddenly walk past, and you never see him coming. There is a tree that has become a memorial for a dog that died. Coincidentally, a German Shepherd. Same breed as the man has got and looks very similar. Sometimes in the furthest corners of the woods, I distinctly hear a dog collar behind me or nearby. Here's where things get a bit strange. There's a spot we use for campfires and drinking. We were there late at night at around 9 to 10 p.m, but gradually began feeling creeped out as the energy started to increase. We started hearing a very strange noise. It definitely was not a fox or a bird. It sounded very sweet and innocent at first until it turned into blood-curdling shrieking. We quickly packed our stuff and went on a mission to get the hell out of Dodge. There's a field that serves as the main access point to the woods. We were using the main path through it and got an overwhelming sense of dread, sadness, and almost anger mixed together. In the bushes to the side of the path, we heard running. Very, very heavy running. And all of a sudden we started hearing the most horrible growling and screaming noises getting worse and worse until we got to the exit of the field. And it all stopped. We didn't hear it run away, but all the noises and running just stopped. We all had strange dreams that night. One time, I heard very heavy running footsteps in the bushes right behind me while my friend was having a pee. I turned around to see if it was him, but there's no way it was because he hadn't moved from that spot. He came back and asked if I had heard the running too. 2 days ago, I went back there for the first time in around 5 months, alone. As I moved away from the local area, the strange feeling was still there. In some areas, it felt like it had gotten worse. I went back again today and there was heavy rainfall the last couple of days, so the ground is very muddy. I kept hearing the dog collar that follows me around, and I noticed strange hoof marks in the ground, but they were very inconsistent. Groups of them would appear, and then there wouldn't be any more until around 15 to 20 meters up the path. They definitely weren't there 2 days ago, and these woods take so long to get into, many people wouldn't bother going there. And it's impossible to get a horse in there. I have a few theories about this forest. One, I think it could be a similar presence to Goatman, as he is often linked to canine deaths. The potential cryptid activity and hoof marks are consistent to this theory. 2, very unlikely but plausible, it could be the devil's hoof marks. The presence definitely feels demonic. 3, the forest is potentially a dumping ground for bodies. There was a suspected murder in the local town and police searched the woods. It would explain the strange presence, but not the cryptid activity. 4, people with dirt bikes sometimes use the forest. One of them could have died there and haunts it. Story 6 by Reddit user ParaliCX. Before I begin the encounter, I would like to provide backstory. I live in Pennsylvania, and during this particular encounter, I was at my aunt's. She has 3 kids, and her house is about 3 to 5 miles down a remote dirt road off a highway through the rural area. She is approximately 25 minutes away from a store and 35 minutes away from the police. And before I start, understand that I do not usually believe in supernatural things. It was about 2 to 4 months ago. I was at my aunt's for a birthday party. I got there around 2 p.m. and by 7 p.m. we were ready to leave. My cousins, her kids, asked if I would stay over because they don't see me very often. I agreed, as I would also enjoy time with them. So, after the party and everyone had left, it was my aunt, her 3 kids, and her husband and I. My aunt and uncle went to bed at around 9:30–10 p.m. I stayed up with the youngest cousin, who we will call Amy. Amy and I were in the living room watching some Criminal Minds up until around 11 p.m. She decided to go to bed and I stayed up watching the show. Mind you, it is now pitch black outside, and I am in the middle of the woods. For this factor, they had motion-activated lights outside. As I was watching television on the couch, which was against the window, I noticed that the light outside turns on. My heart is beating, seeing as it's the middle of the woods and people should not be around the house. I looked out, and luckily it was just a deer about 20 to 30 feet out by the tree line. Since it was only a deer, I went back to watching my show. Of course, the deer was cute, nothing to be worried about, right? 5 minutes passed by and the lights shut off. Still watching Criminal Minds, I gather my blankets and pillows to get ready for bed, as I was sleeping in the living room that night. As I'm settling the pillows on the couch and laying the blanket down, a sudden bright flash startled me. It's the motion-activated light outside of the living room window. Before I even looked, I thought to myself, it was just the deer again. However, I looked out again reluctantly. There was nothing there. At this point, it was 11:45, almost midnight, and I'm yawning. I go back to organizing my sleep space, and not even 30 seconds later I hear something clank the window that I had just observed out of. Once again, I turn to check out what the hell just hit the window, and what I saw. I can't even explain it rationally. Off to the side by the tree in the yard was the deer again. However, it wasn't the same deer. It looked deformed, almost malnourished. Stomach extremely sunken in and barely any fat on the animal. It just stood there, looking straight at me. It felt like it was staring into my soul almost. This deer, if it could even be called a deer, made me feel extremely unsettled, and I did not feel safe. What I saw next made my stomach sink to my feet. The malnourished deer that made me feel so foreboding and disturbed feeling contorted and ran off. On 2 legs. 2. It went into the woods, out of my sight. By this time, I'm absolutely freaking out. My heart is racing, and I'm the only one awake. I immediately closed the curtains, ran to make sure the windows were locked, and I sat away from the window. Trying to process what I had just seen was troubling. No matter how much I thought about it, I could not rationalize what I saw. This deer, literally skin and bone, contorted and folded in ways that are not even capable with normal joint function. The way it ran off on 2 legs, the way it stared at me before all of it happened. I don't understand it. I did not sleep that night. I ended up going to my aunt's bedroom telling her what I had seen. She did not believe me and told me, "You're just tired, so you're seeing things." I can tell you with 100% certainty that I saw what I saw. After that night, I refused to stay at my aunt's anymore, and if we would go there for a party, we made sure we left before dusk. I've heard other stories from locals in the area from when they were hunting. I remember one mentioning a tribe or cult that lived in the area off the beaten path. Maybe it was one of them and I was just tired. Maybe not. If anyone has had anything similar, please let me know. I feel crazy because I haven't found anything similar, and I can't even talk about it to people because they will think I'm on drugs. Story 7, by Reddit user I Like to Shoot Dog. This happened to me and a friend a few times on his farm a couple of years ago. I'm not 100% sure what the thing was, but here we go. The first encounter was at dusk. I was visiting his farm with one of our other friends. We were walking along a large rocky riverbank around 600 meters away from his house. Across the riverbank is thick pine forestry. Our other friend was making whistling noises with his hands when exactly the same whistle was repeated back to us from across the river. Not like an echo sort of repeat, it sounded like it came from the woods across the river. This creeped us the fuck out, so we started walking back to the house. The path back to the house is surrounded by shrubs and small trees. Beyond that is a large field. After a few minutes of walking, we started to feel like we were being watched, hearing rustles and footsteps around the trees by the path. A distinct twig crack was heard some 10 feet away from us. We looked down to see if there was a rabbit or another small rodent. Stoats and possums are quite common around the New Zealand countryside. However, what we saw was not a rodent or a marsupial. At a clearing in the bushes, there stood a long, twisted, pale foot. We immediately bolted the remaining 300 or so back to the house and locked the door behind us. The second encounter was late at night, a few weeks after the foot. We were camping a few hundred meters from the house in a light bushy sort of area with a small clearing. We were messing around, telling stories and such. At around 1 a.m. we began hearing footsteps around the outside of the tent. At first, we thought it might be a deer or something, but it began sounding more and more like heavy bipedal footsteps. It got closer and closer until it reached the outside of the tent, and then the sound vanished. Sometime later, we began hearing the footsteps again, pacing and pacing around the tent like whatever it was stalking us. It seemed to go on for hours, but we dared not look outside the tent. At around 3 a.m, my friend's dog began really going nuts at whatever was outside. We heard something bolt off into the bushes after a few minutes of barking. We eventually managed to drift off to sleep, but we were really shaken that night. I personally haven't experienced any other encounters firsthand since the tent, but my friend has heard really strange howling noises, tapping on his bedroom window, and the feeling of being watched, especially out by the riverbank. We've reached out to his neighbours and chillingly, they too have had strange occurrences. One of his neighbours has supposedly caught some sort of creature killing his chickens en masse. Another neighbour said he encountered a pale humanoid crouching near him while he was hiding in some shrubs during a spotlight game. He was genuinely in tears describing it. Others have heard strange howling and screaming noises similar to the ones we have described. Thankfully, a lot of these occurrences have halted over the past several months. Part of us wants whatever it was to never come back. Another part of us wants to see it again, to find out what the thing was and what it was doing. But perhaps we'll never know. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I know there is a ton of content out there, and I sincerely appreciate you watching this right through to the end. Again, if you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit the like button, and if you don't already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel and select the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my future uploads. Also, please leave a comment on this video, let me know what you thought of it. Comments really help with the YouTube algorithm and will really help my channel to grow. Also, let me know what type of videos you would like to see more of on this channel. That really helps me branch out into new subject matters. If you have a story you would like me to narrate, please email it to me at stories@daredevil.com. I'm getting really close to my next major milestone of 100,000 subscribers. Thank you to everyone who is continuing to subscribe to this channel and contributing to its growth by liking videos and leaving comments. I'm currently in the process of working on a 3-hour Wendigo story video featuring completely original stories. Once I reach 100,000 subscribers, I'll have that ready to release for you all. If you want to support my channel even further, there are a number of ways you can do so. You can buy me a coffee via my Ko-fi account. Check out my Teespring store and consider purchasing one of my shirt designs. Or simply, help me out by sharing my content with anyone you might think is interested in watching it. Thanks again.